Germany has just unveiled a new weapon pulled straight out of Russian President Vladimir Putin's worst nightmares. And it gets worse for Putin. That weapon is on its way to Ukraine right now. A massive 6,000 of them, to be precise, with more being promised for the future to allow Ukraine to make its drone advantage over Russia really count. But what is this terrifying new German weapon? Who builds it? And why is Putin so terrified of seeing it make its way onto the battlefield in Ukraine? On February 13th, the drone manufacturer and AI specialist Helsing announced that it was preparing to deliver 6,000 of its HX-2 combat drones to Ukraine. That drone was first unveiled in December 2024, with the highlight being the AI-powered autonomous system that powers the weapon. That system allows multiple HX-2s to pick out targets and attack in volume, all under the control of a single drone operator. Helsing's goal was to balance affordability with operational scalability and precision. In other words, the HX-2 is cheap, accurate, and can be produced in massive volumes. Helsing calls the HX-2 an evolution in autonomous systems, claiming that it has learned from the need for adaptability in the Ukraine war to build a drone that's perfectly suited for Ukraine's needs. The UK's Defence Secretary John Healey spoke at the unveiling, stating, "The Ukraine conflict has demonstrated that a nation's armed forces are only as strong as the industry and innovation behind them. Industrial production doesn't just support good jobs and economic growth, but can determine the outcomes of conflicts and the strength of our deterrence." Healey also announced a $440 million investment into Helsing over the next 5 years in the wake of the HX-2's unveiling. All of that sounds like a British success story that happens to be beneficial to Ukraine, so where does Germany fit into all of this? Though headquartered in London, Helsing is a multinational company with German origins and a strong European presence. Germany's recent order of 6,000 HX-2s for Ukraine, along with 4,000 HF-1 combat drones in 2024, underscores this connection. Helsing also set up what it calls a resilience factory in southern Germany, which will be responsible for the future production of the HX-2. That factory, combined with Germany's order of the HX-2 for Ukraine, will make Helsing one of the world's largest manufacturers of combat drones. And with that growth will come the ability to build more factories, manufacture more drones, and make Ukraine's war machine a terrifying threat to Putin. It's a true nightmare weapon. And there are several reasons why. When it was first revealed, the HX-2 was touted as a response to Russia's Lancet III drones. In some quarters, it was unfairly named a mini Taurus, in reference to the German missile of the same name. But the reality is that the HX-2 is so much more than that. Coming back to Russia's Lancet III, the HX-2 certainly shares some similarities. It has X-shaped wings like the Lancet, along with similar tail fins. It even shares the same purpose. Both the Lancet and HX-2 are kamikaze drones that are packed with explosives before being sent on their way to their targets. If the HX-2 was a carbon copy of the Lancet, that would still be a boon for Ukraine. Russia's drone is capable of traveling up to 24.8 miles at speeds approaching 68.3 miles per hour. That makes it a fast-moving, albeit short-range weapon that's difficult to shoot out of the air. The Lancet also has a 40-minute battery life, making it ideal for use as a loitering munition that hangs around and then attacks a target as it appears, and it can be used to destroy tanks, armored vehicles, and artillery systems. Add to this a 26.4-pound takeoff weight, which includes 6.6 pounds of explosives, and you have a fairly impressive drone. So how does the HX-2 compare to Russia's drone? It beats it in every aspect that matters, and it incorporates technology that's a long way outside of Putin's reach. That's what makes HX-2 such a devastating weapon and a significant threat to Russian forces. Starting with its range, the HX-2 can travel up to 62 miles. While that isn't far enough to make the drone an effective long-range weapon that can strike into the heart of Russia, it's still more than double the range of the Lancet III that it's designed to counter. Helsing's Vice President of Sales for Land Systems, Simon Bruniers, explains why that's so important. HX-2 is specifically designed to operate in so-called dead spaces, that is, at ranges between 30 and 80 kilometers, roughly between 18.6 and 49.7 miles, where conventional drone systems often reach their limits, claims Bruniers. That means HX-2 can go where other short-range drones can't, allowing it to operate in areas where Russian forces might have limited drone defenses. Beyond that, the HX-2 matches the takeoff weight of the Lancet III, meaning that the warhead it carries will also likely be in the 6.6-pound region. It also has a similar cruising speed to Russia's drone, according to Defense Express, with the big mechanical difference being the HX-2's longer range, which allows it to destroy enemy tanks and artillery behind the front lines of the war. All of this alone would make the HX-2 terrifying for Putin. However, notice that we said mechanical difference just now. We've used that distinction because there's something else the HX-2 delivers that Russia has never seen on the battlefield before: amazing AI software. Although Helsing builds combat drones, its main area of expertise is software development, and it's used software to make HX-2 one of the first truly software-defined drones in existence. The drone's onboard artificial intelligence is completely immune to electronic warfare, or EW tactics that Russia has previously used to throw Ukraine's drones off course. Where in the past Russia could at least defend itself against drone swarms by scrambling their signals, making it impossible for an operator to control them, the HX-2 won't be affected at all. HX-2 will also make it impossible for Russia to detect where drones are coming from. Russia has used EW to locate control stations Ukraine uses to launch its drone attacks. That detection places the stations in line for attacks, ruining their ability to send more drones onto the battlefield and potentially leading to casualties among Ukraine's drone operators. EW has also allowed Russia to cause serious damage to Ukraine's drone stockpiles. According to the Australian Army Research Centre, May 2023 alone saw Russia use EW techniques across every 6.2 miles of the Ukraine war's front lines, allowing it to destroy 10,000 Ukrainian drones in a single month. None of this will happen with HX-2. The onboard AI makes sure of that. Even if signals are disrupted, the drone's AI allows it to continue to search for, re-identify, and engage its targets without any direct instructions from its operator. Of course, operators are still important. The drone informs its operator of every key decision it wants to make, assuming the connection between the operator and drone remains stable. But when that connection is severed, Putin's forces still have to deal with a drone that can attack them autonomously. And it gets even worse for Russia. Complementing the onboard AI is Helsing's Altra software. That software allows any piece of equipment that has it installed to intelligently communicate with each other. Again, AI is at the forefront. Through this communication, one drone out of a swarm of HX-2s could identify a target and transmit its coordinates to the rest of the drones in the swarm. Those drones all then zero in on the same target, bombarding it with kamikaze attacks. Helsing calls the software a 10 times force multiplier, and it's not wrong. Altra live streams the data that each HX-2 drone captures, transmitting it to both other drones and the swarm's operator. That makes Ukraine's new drone just as valuable for reconnaissance as it is for kamikaze assaults. Kyiv can use the drone to get an accurate picture of portions of the battlefield that its other drones can't reach, allowing it to organize attacks, while its HX-2 swarms cause chaos. Best of all, Altra allows a single drone operator to control an entire swarm. So not only does the software create a force multiplier, but it also allows Ukraine to minimize the resources it needs to keep its drones in the air. A single operator can control multiple HX-2s, all loitering from behind the front lines until one of them spots a target. That data is transmitted back to the operator via Altra, as well as to the other drones, allowing the operator to engage in a large-scale sequential attack on the target. It's an incredibly high-tech system. And it's unlike anything that Putin's forces have faced on the battlefield up to this point. We also have to consider the future ramifications of the Altra software. Right now, it's installed as standard into every HX-2 drone Ukraine will receive. That's 6,000 drones per the February 13th delivery notice. However, Ukraine has also received 4,000 Helsing HF-1 combat drones. Those could also be equipped with Altra, creating an even more powerful network of unmanned aerial vehicles for Russia to contend with. If the software is compatible with other Ukrainian drones, or even assets such as artillery units and aerial defense systems, it could transform a huge portion of Ukraine's military hardware into a massive networked system powered by AI. So Russia has to deal with new drones that can communicate with one another and swarm on a target at a moment's notice. And the nightmare only gets even worse for Putin. Do you remember that we mentioned Helsing's plans to build a resilience factory in southern Germany? This isn't a buzzword to Helsing. Each resilience factory is an extremely efficient production facility that allows the nation in which it's built to manufacture Helsing's drones locally. The idea is that each factory gives a nation sovereign control over its means of production. In time, these resilience factories will become the backbone of drone production at scale, at least in the Helsing ecosystem, to allow multiple countries to each build their own HX-2s along with the company's other drones. Why does that matter? The resilience factory Helsing has set up in southern Germany is already capable of producing 1,000 HX-2 drones per month, at a low, albeit undisclosed, cost. That's 1,000 new HX-2s that could make their way into Ukraine every month, building on the already powerful network of 6,000 it has, while replacing any of the drones that get destroyed via kamikaze attacks or Russian aerial defenses on the battlefield. If that wasn't a terrifying enough prospect for Putin, Helsing has no intention of stopping in southern Germany. It plans to build resilience factories across several locations throughout Europe, with the goal of reaching HX-2 production in the tens of thousands of units monthly. Helsing co-founder Gundbert Scherf says, "We are increasing HX-2 production in parallel with new orders. The war in Ukraine shows every day that modern, precise technology can compensate for numerical disadvantages compared to older systems. With our resilience factories, we are focused on decentralized mass production across Europe." Scherf's co-founding partner Nicholas Köhler expands on the point, adding, "We have brought together Europe's brightest minds to develop mass production of the future." It's not just the HX-2 that will torment Putin and his troops on the ground. It's what the drone represents and how it threatens to change the entire complexion of Russia's special military operation that makes it a major game-changer. Building on Köhler and Scherf's words, Helsing's resilience factories are just one of many ways that Putin's actions in Ukraine have united the rest of Europe against him. Chatham House highlights this unity, noting that European Union or EU nations were quick to agree on implementing sanctions against Russia in the wake of Putin's invasion. Those sanctions have been built upon since. The EU alone currently levies 2,234 sanctions against Russia, with the UK having 1,918, France implementing 2,175, and Switzerland levying 3,010 separately from the collective. Europe is also united in terms of applying price caps on Russian oil and sending military aid to Ukraine, showcasing a resolve that Putin never expected. He'd hoped that his invasion would cause fractures, with the EU nations getting bogged down among themselves in arguments over how to respond. Instead, he's united much of Europe, particularly the EU and NATO member nations, against him. His actions led to Finland and Sweden pushing to become NATO members so they could benefit from collective defense. They've also served as a wake-up call to several major European powers, including France and Germany, according to Chatham House, that the geopolitical climate of the continent has changed. In short, the war in Ukraine has created a stronger Europe, one that's collectively against Putin and everything he wants to achieve. Helsing and the resilience factories it's building throughout the continent for its HX-2 drones are direct outcomes of that increased unity. Europe is already proposing the creation of a single market for weapons procurement. That's according to Internationale Politik Quarterly, which says the European Commission has proposed a new defense industrial program designed specifically to enable joint purchases. The Commission aims to ensure EU member states jointly purchase at least 40% of their defense equipment from companies that build within Europe, allocating at least half of their procurement budgets to this task in the process. Helsing's new factories feed into those goals. Whether the European Commission's proposals come to fruition remains to be seen, but it's clear that there's a paradigm shift in how Europe's Western-aligned nations deal with Putin in the wake of the invasion. They're no longer willing to handle Russia alone and have realized that the best defense against an imperialistic authoritarian is working together. Helsing's resilience factories are emblematic of that desire and represent a clear message to Putin that he's not just fighting Ukraine anymore. He's dealing with an entire continent that stands against him. The situation doesn't get any better for Putin when we zoom in on the Ukrainian battlefield. Take HX-2's kamikaze capabilities as an example. Ukraine has made extensive use of kamikaze drones throughout much of the war. Every strike against a Russian oil refinery or steel production mill makes use of long-range drones that are packed with explosives and fly directly into their targets in order to destroy them. In December 2024, Le Monde reported on Ukraine's extensive use of the Rubaka drone, which can travel up to 310 miles while carrying an explosive that weighs up to 22 pounds to attack deep into the heart of Russia. It also has much larger kamikaze drones, some capable of traveling double the distance of the Rubaka, that allow Ukraine to hit Moscow itself. These deep-strike kamikaze drones have become one of the most important hallmarks of Ukraine's strategy against Russia, which is why it aims to build 30,000 of them by the end of 2025. Now, with 6,000 HX-2s in its arsenal, along with the potential for at least 1,000 more to arrive per month, Ukraine's short-range kamikaze drone capabilities are just as powerful as its long-range strike capacity. These networked drones ensure that Ukraine has to dedicate fewer operatives to the battlefield, especially given that an entire swarm can be controlled by one person. That leads to less risk when taking out targets just behind the front lines. HX-2s have also sharpened Ukraine's metaphorical sword, because the country is no longer limited to attacking a target with 1 or 2 explosive drones. It can send dozens, all working in concert to decimate Russia's tanks and artillery units. Those kamikaze capabilities allow Ukraine's soldiers to weaken Russian offensives before those offensives even reach their fortifications. It all adds up to 2 things: less pressure on Ukraine and more casualties for Russia. That's going to be devastating to Putin, considering that he's already lost over 855,000 people, more than 10,000 tanks, and over 23,000 artillery systems. The introduction of the HX-2 to Ukraine makes Kyiv more capable of combating Russia's heavy equipment while causing casualties, all at a time when Russia is struggling to maintain its equipment stockpiles. We mentioned that Ukraine plans to build 30,000 deep strike drones just now. Therein lies another reason why the introduction of HX-2 will change the complexion of the battlefield in the war. It further asserts Kyiv's dominance in the drone war. Both sides have made heavy use of drones to conduct long-range strikes and support their troops on the ground. However, Ukraine realized the importance of these unmanned aerial vehicles long before Russia, and its internal manufacturing capacity is more developed as a result. Ukraine is now at the point where it can build 4 million drones per year, with Russia only capable of building 1.4 million. Kyiv can manufacture more than 3 times the number of drones Russia builds. In that context, 6,000 HX-2s might seem like a drop in the ocean. However, when you add those drones coming from external sources to the millions Ukraine is building domestically, you get a recipe for Kyiv ruling the skies above its own country. That's without mentioning the possibility that Helsing may set up one of its resilience factories in Ukraine, delivering more domestic drone manufacturing capacity to the country. Finally, there's the often underappreciated aspect of Ukraine's drone dominance. It allows Ukraine to develop advantages elsewhere on the battlefield. In January 2025, Forbes war reporter David Axe wrote that Ukraine may have finally developed a tank advantage over Russia for the first time since Putin launched his invasion in February 2022. That advantage only extended to some stretches of the 800-mile front line, but Ukraine's ability to manufacture it at all is remarkable, considering just how many more tanks Putin had at his disposal earlier in the war. How did Ukraine create these pockets of tank advantage? It all comes down to drones. As one Russian military blogger put it, the enemy has achieved sufficient scale and variety in its drones and has honed its tactics for their use. Whenever Ukraine has managed to deploy 2 company-sized drone units along with a couple of dozen drone operators near the front line, Russian tanks simply don't reach the line for launching an attack, says the blogger. They're destroyed long before they can engage in any direct assaults. The introduction of HX-2 will only make these preemptive strikes stronger. Ukraine will no longer need to dedicate several dozen operators to its attacks against Russian tanks. It can send 1 or 2, each operating a swarm of AI-powered drones that pack enough of an explosive punch to take out the Russian tanks, and are capable of working together to do so. And even if Russia manages to take out the operators, its tanks and other equipment won't be safe. The HX-2's autonomous attack capabilities make sure of that. With this powerful new German-made drone, Ukraine can potentially build more pockets along the front line where it has superiority on the ground as well as in the drone department. Perhaps that will be the most important thing that HX-2 delivers to Ukraine as the war moves deeper into 2025. But what do you think about HX-2? Is it as impressive as it sounds, and how will Russia try to combat swarms of AI-powered drones when it's already struggling to deal with the drones Ukraine was building before? Let us know what you think in the comments, and remember that we'll be covering more of these drone developments as they happen, so be sure to subscribe to the channel for the latest information about the Ukraine war.